Well, Gary, well, there you go. That's sorted you out. You know what to do now. You're down in London. I'll just stay here on my keyboard in Leicester. I'll be fine. I can warrior away from here. But you were also saying within that piece in terms of what else then you were going to talk about licensing. You were going to say the impact of licensing, and Gary and I touched on this with Michael Kell, didn't we? Yeah. About the instant restrictive nature or nature of licensing in the event that something goes wrong, or it doesn't even have to go wrong. The thing that made me smile there was when you were saying about one noise complaint. One of my favorite tales is I worked at a nightclub, and we were about to reopen after being closed for more than a year. That wasn't my fault, by the way. So we went to obviously go for the licensing application, and the old Bill poodled up and said, "Oh, there's been a 300% rise in in violence." And it went through all of this thing. It turns out it was actually 300% rise in violence was 3 people. It's great how you can use percentages to show things. It was just 3 people. And he said, well, the bench turned around and said, well, what is it? And what have you got to say to this, Mr. Vic? I can't say his name, but he said, well, you think we were closed during that period. We haven't been open for a year. We haven't been open at all. None of these incidents that this office, that the licensing officer is citing, actually occurred during any time when we were actually open for business, full stop. And they come from other areas. But if you can utilize licensing or weaponize licensing regulation in that way, how does that impact on businesses and their drive to remain profitable?
Yeah.
Viable.
Profitable.
Profitable, yeah.
Profit's not a dirty word, right?
No, it's not. It's great.
We need to remember that people need to be, but profitable business can invest in good quality guest safety officer teams, can't they? They can invest in good marketing. They can turn away the worst punters, right? We want profitable venues, regardless of what some people might like to think, right? So as a sector, it needs to be profitable. There's a difference between being extractive and not reinvesting and looking after your customers, right? And that's that's different to being profitable and successful and sustainable and healthy, right? In terms of licensing, right, something I thought about that you were saying there really was one of the weaponizing it. I think that's a really interesting term. I think if I can take a step back from it for a second, I think we're moving in a different direction now. I think most of the war, and it goes back to what you were asking before about how do we, say the social economy, the nighttime economy is now super valuable and something worthy of investment and on an equal footing to the daytime economy or other parts of our lives and our businesses and economies, right? I think there's a change happening. I think the fact that young people as a cohort, not individually, but as a cohort are drinking a lot less, that will manifest itself without doubt in terms of what, Gary, you're seeing on the door. I think, yes, we still have some violence, but I think young people's behavior is changing. Ideas of masculinity are changing. And I think, healthy behaviors, people adopting more healthy lifestyles. None of these things have come from any single public health measure or public investment measure, right? It's been entirely driven by a complex concept of factors, but, looking good on Instagram or not wanting to come across, as drunk or out of control, right? That's been a massive driver in the change of your 18 to 25-year-olds. Well, now 30-year-olds probably going through to that generation. So I think that's changing. I think it goes back to your point around licensing was very much a regulatory function. A lot of the time it was very heavy-handed, right? So you went straight from we've got an incident, and I'm not talking about really extreme things like the tragedy we saw at the O2 in Brixton, right? But I'm talking about an incident of violence in a nightclub, for example. But you went straight from a well-run nightclub that might have due diligence and all the procedures in place and could evidence why, on most counts, it was doing a really good job, to police officers and or some licensing officers finding a chink in the armor and going, here's a few things you weren't doing properly, therefore we're going to try and close you down and get a review, right? I think that is changing now, and I think licensing officers up and down the country are, they have the powers where they need them, right? If you've got a real problem, Benny, you can close it down like that, okay? But I think they're realizing, and a lot of licensing officers are now very good at supporting businesses to be better, right? To be safer, to even help their own business model in terms of how they look after customers better, how they present themselves better to the public by supporting things like Best Bar None scheme or some of the other similar schemes that are out there. There's loads of stuff around wave training and vulnerability training, which I'm sure you've talked about on other podcasts, which is often driven by local authorities. So I think there's a much more collegiate environment in terms of how licensing officers, environmental health officers, the police are working with a lot of venues, right? I'll give you an example. In Camden at the moment, they have a regular round table there led by the head of licensing there. And she works with their higher risk, doesn't mean they're bad, they're great venues, but they are higher risk venues, to look at how they together, 8 or 9 of them across, because it's the live music capital of the UK, possibly the world, Camden, how they can ensure that their venues are all operating in a way where that O2 thing can never happen, right? And they were doing that before that happened. Now, that's not to say that Lambeth, where that's based, weren't being proactive. That there's an inquiry into that. Can't really speak to it yet. But what Camden are doing is very proactive around supporting venues to be safe for their patrons, right? Not just waiting for something bad to happen and closing them down. And that has to be, everywhere needs to be doing that, not just Camden, because it's got 8 or 9 high profile live music nightclub venues, right? Everywhere should be doing it at a appropriate level for them.
I like you brought Camden up, because Camden's always been a very practical area. I used to work there many years ago, but I do find a lot of areas in London are still not doing that. They're not being proactive. They're still got that very negative impact, and they look for that, as you said, they look for those chinks all the time. It's not a great thing, but it would be nice to see more licensing authorities doing that and getting more involved. As you say, some places are, some places aren't, but the majority of the time, I find I come across a lot of negativity from licensing officers. Not the council side; it's mainly the police side. There's probably about 2 or 3 actual licensing officers. I actually got their phone numbers on my phone, direct dial, are very, very good. But again, as I say, I come across a high percentage where the negativity from the police side is very, very poor. It's not proactive at all.
My anecdotal and knowledge and experience tells me that there's a disconnect, and I find this between leadership, those who make the decisions, and those that actually have to implement the decisions in reality, and that applies to the police and licensing anybody. The chief constables, etc., say this is a great idea. Talk to my people. You go and talk to their people, and they go, "Why are we doing this? We're all right, thanks, mate. We've been doing this years. We're the police, don't you know that? That's our job." And that disconnect from the forward-looking, progressive understanding of the nature of evolution, of the evolutionary nature of the nighttime economy, social economy, whatever way you want to call it, a 24-hour nation approach, is not then put down on the ground because it interferes with their own personal objectives, yeah, and having a quiet life, etc., etc.
Yeah, I would say the variety of approaches is great in police licensing, right? For sure, right? And I wonder if that's because there's no sort of trade body for police licensing. They will attend the Institute of Licensing at conferences, etc. But the Institute of Licensing has done a lot with bringing barristers and licensing solicitors together with licensing officers, you know, people who are interested in the quality, the safety, the sustainability of our licensed economy, not just nighttime, but sporting events during the day, etc. Concerts, and they've done a lot of incredible work about trying to spread best practice over the last 10 years, trying to kind of reach some common standards about how you deal with certain types of incidents and what are the best approaches and how to be proactive, etc. I'm not sure that police licensing officers, because I think they see themselves generally, again, it's really important to say that they're not all like that. Like Gary said, there's some great ones out there. I think they see themselves as, often they're devolved, right? So they've got a lot of autonomy, which is your point, Ian, right? And I'm not saying power always goes to the head, right? But in some cases it does, because then they become judge and jury in terms of objecting to licenses, regardless, before things happen, right? So they're always looking for what's the worst that could possibly go wrong to argue for licensing conditions on venues that may be either unrealistic. I mean, some of the crazy ones we've seen over the years, they're kind of absolutely wild, you know, totally unenforceable and unachievable for the venue. And I think some of them, you know, do see themselves as removed from the whole process, right? And they shouldn't be involved in it, and they certainly shouldn't be offering advice to venues or supporting them, because then that's, you're sort of going over to the other side then. And while I have sympathy that you have to have some critical distance, because ultimately you may have to take enforcement action or ask for a review of license against the premises, I do think at the same time, your advice as an expert in licensing, police licensing, and what the police want from a well-run venue could really help, particularly those venues that are independent, newer, smaller, got a great proposition, but don't have the understanding of how to run that side of the business. They could be really helpful in that sense. But I reckon of 1 in 10, perhaps, you know, I'm pulling a figure, there's definitely no science behind that. 1 in 10, Gary, I don't know, would have that whole, you know, that proactive ability to support a business while still saying, if it goes wrong or you run it properly, I will be here to enforce, right?
Right, I've got, because I'm well aware. Do you know, the most annoying thing about these podcasts is we have interesting people. And as a consequence, each week, Gary tells me, you can't talk for any longer than half an hour. In fact, did I not send you an email, both of you? And here we are again, approaching the hour mark, and I could stay here all day. But so I'm gonna try and finish off, and then I'll try and split this up when I do it and put it out for general release. Is
this going to be like Pink Floyd, like a gatefold 70s album? There'll be part one and part two,
mate,
Ian.
It could easily be. It could
Dark
easily
side
go
of the
that. Yeah, well,
box.
we're on the dark side anyway. Well, Gary is. But the long and short is, right. I want to bring you back to you said about policing and the withdrawal, and that's not meant to be disrespectful of the police, because, as I say on this show regularly, I have a great deal of sympathy for the police, because the police are not made up of your Wayne Cousins and the other guy. That is not what is. They are made up, most of them, 99.99% of the police, just like guest safety officers, get up every day with the sole intention of making our society better and protecting it. But regardless of that, you know, taking that aside or as read, there has been the withdrawal, you know, of police numbers, the reduction, etc. The impact, they've invariably been taken out of the nighttime economy, social economy, and you find that this policing on the cheap, is now effectively carried out by SIA trained, DS license holder with poor training in reality, and they're there and left to carry the bulk of of creating this civilized space that we all want to go out on and enjoy. And the supplementary of this probably is, have we got a bloated nighttime sector within the context of where the basic foundation from Maslow, from the perspective of Maslow, sort of safety, anything where safety isn't properly embedded in or appreciated, and that if we want the society, if we want the nighttime economy to grow, then we need to address this as a matter of urgency.
Yeah, okay. I'd agree that, most police officers, and I spent a lot of time with police officers out and about around town and city centres. I've seen occasional terrible practice, but mostly I've seen good practice. Okay. Are they particularly all well trained around the issues they're going to face in the evening and nighttime economy? Probably not as much as they should do. But when I started doing, we call them night audits, so I would take out senior council people, businesses, representatives of residents groups, and the police out, and we do visits around the town city centre. I like people to see, who sit at a desk from 9 to 5, what their town and city is like at night, going back to how you promote it and how you embed a culture of advocacy for it, right? Because most of it is great, and they're always amazed about how well certain things work and how well people behave and how exciting it is. And then we always find loads and loads of stuff that you can improve on, right? But most of it's nuts and bolts rather than more serious stuff. We've had a 20 to 25% frontline officer cut over the last 10 years. When I was doing the nighttime strategy for Liverpool back in about 2010, the Merseyside Constabulary put 12 officers on Liverpool city centre, and the council paid for, no, they put 20 officers on Liverpool city centre and the council paid for another 12. It was approximately 30 officers on a Friday and Saturday night patrolling Liverpool city centre. Now, I don't know Liverpool today, but soon after the council, obviously massive austerity, Liverpool particularly badly hit, they stopped paying the council for supplementary police officers. And where this was around the country, it was almost certainly true. Some business improvement districts might pay for 2 extra, but often they were during the day, right, about retail theft. So we've seen a massive withdrawal from the public realm of police officers in our city centres at night, right? Now, there's research out there that shows that too many police officers create a feeling of unsafety, right? So there's definitely room for the guest safety officer community to be doing a lot of the guest safety officer work, right? Of reassurance, of welcoming, of setting standards, of early intervention, and all of those things that you know much more about than me. But most town and city centres now, there's a few exceptions. You'd be really hard pushed to find a police officer walking around between 7 and 2 o'clock in the morning, right? In fact, I'd argue you're probably more likely to see them during the day, pottering about the shops, saying hello to people, than coming out when they might be most required. Now, I'm not saying, given all that we've said in this podcast about it being safe in the evening and at night, or much safer than people think it is, or a lot of people think it is, but we would still like them back. And I worked in an area, and this was in a Metropolitan Police area in southwest London 10 or 15 years ago. And this was one of the first places I'd ever seen withdraw police officers off the street and just have them in the station nearby. And I kicked up a real fuss, and I got 2 out on the street. The businesses were so grateful, the nighttime businesses were so grateful to have those 2 officers. A small town, you didn't need more than 2. walking around. You know, they can bring in a carrier police van for people. You know, if there was ever an incident, they can bring in other officers on the beat because the police station is in the town centre. But the police station was next to the late night venue, right? So they would just sit at their desk when they had the resources, just waiting for a phone call. And I was like, this is not good enough. We have to have them out on the street. The public expect to see the police officers walking around the town centre, giving reassurance, you know, giving advice. They know the town centre, helping people navigate around it, helping them get to the bus station, you know, when they're not dealing with the important stuff that police officers must prioritize, right? So there's a combination of guest safety officers, police officers, and wardens, or some of the business improvement districts have people out giving out advice in the evening, and street pastors, street angels, those types of schemes. You know, in a place that is safe, you have all of those. You don't need loads of cops on the street, but you need some. And I'd like to see over the next 10 years them back on the street in small numbers, providing that reassurance agenda.
Gary?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. It's nice to see police officers out on the street. What can I say? They are. It's handy when they are there. But as I said to you last week, we had a situation with a young lady, and she phoned the police, and they didn't even turn up for her. You know, and that's, you know, it didn't even turn up for us if we wanted the police there. Mm-hmm. So it says out, they're not around. They're just not around.
It's, you know? Yeah, no, as I think it's a research that I did and a few years ago. You know, it's one. You know, the minimum you've got is 10 to 1 of guest safety officers on any given night in the, you know, in the nighttime economy. And when you get to things like Saturday and Sunday, you're looking at around 20 to 1 at least. And you go to a festival or a football stadium, and it just goes out the roof. You know, it goes over the roof. Yeah. And within those particular areas like festivals, stadia, the level of training, you know, and I know the guys who run these things, they do their absolute best, but they can't possibly train them to the level that is now required following, you know, the report from the Manchester Arena inquiry. Ali, you know, how can we be more proactive? How can we get involved in, you know, dealing and being on, you know, boards like, you know, boards, committees like the ones you attend, etc., or at least properly feed into them?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I don't want to take up too much time. I know you need to bring it to a close. But of all the purple flag audits that I've done, when I've been out on at night, or ones that I've done on my own for strategies that me and colleagues are creating, and for all of the ones that purple flag audits, when we get them in for a town or city centre, there's 75 of them or so now, and they have to be renewed every year in phases. I don't think I've ever, and I might be wrong, my colleagues might correct me on this, I don't think I've ever seen one where they've had a representative on the tour from the guest safety officer community, right? They've gone out and they've talked to them, because I always talk to guest safety officers. They're the best people to talk to about how a town or city centre runs at night, better than the police, better than the council, better than the licensing officer, better than the venue manager even, right? Right. So they're my mainstay when I go out, but I've never seen one invited onto a partnership or to a night audit to actually go around and bring their expertise, somebody who actually perhaps runs several doors in a town or whatever. And I would like to see more of that. And I'll take away from this today that I'd like to see it more through purple flag. And I think those door companies where you've got someone like yourself, Gary, or a leader who is not simply about running the business internally, but is trying to advocate for change, I think that we should perhaps have a further discussion at some point about how we can get you and others involved in these, you know, because the expertise is so great. it's not being included in how we manage the nighttime economy. It's just there to pick up the pieces, right?
Absolutely. And, you know, having people like myself around there, as you said, it's the expertise, it's the knowledge of some of these people on the ground. I mean, a lot of people in my age bracket, that they're leaving the industry.
Yeah.
They're having enough, and we're losing those key skills. And have, you know, I've come across many people like myself. They've said things to the SIA, they've said things to people, and it falls on deaf ears all the time. But to get someone like myself and other people on board with these things would make a great difference. And people in the councils and the police will see a different light, because we are the front line. We are the first responders before the police, before the ambulance service, before the fire brigade, before anybody gets there. We are the ones dealing with it straight away.
I consider you the most important people in the nighttime economy, right?
Absolutely.
Without doubt. Not DJs, not venue owners, not managers, not promoters, not customers, certainly not consultants creating strategies.
No.
I consider guest safety officers. See, I'm already the lingo, right? You're very pleased about this.
Yeah, we are. If Gary's actually having some uniforms designed, is having some with guest safety officer, you know, written on the back, or is that right, Gary?
That is GSOs, yeah, guest safety officers.
Yeah, because it's as I said to you before, from a perception point of view. Who wants a thug in a tuxedo? Not me. I don't want a bouncer to represent me. But I do want to tie this up very quickly. So, Gary, is there anything that you'd like to say just to finish off?
My only thing, I'd just go back to that point with Alistair saying it'd be nice to get people like myself on these schemes so we can have our 10 pence worth, and hopefully it doesn't fall on deaf ears. So, but the whole idea of the economy and looking at it from a different point of view, it's very interesting today. It opened my eyes up today as well.
Alistair, saying you've been a star, and we're very grateful that you've been with us, obviously. And yes, we will come back to you. But you will you come again? Will you come on the show again?
Of course I will. I've enjoyed it.
Oh, good.
That's brilliant. Right. People, if people want some more monologues and feisty opinions about stuff, then I'm here to come back and, but it's interesting, actually. I think if you look at the debate you're having in this area that you're opening up from your two perspectives, I like your dynamism and your double act there, right? I think there's a lot of opportunity and fertile ground to get an interface between I'm sounding academic on it. Interface between your sector and your concerns and priorities and the way the rest of the industry and punters experience our towns and cities at night, right? And I think it's fertile ground. I think you need to keep ploughing it and getting this interaction between people from outside of the area into it, so we can find some common ground around things that we might need to take away. So from today, I will take away this point about and go back to, say, Purple Flag, or go back to my colleagues in the business and say, look, this is where I want to see us doing more around engaging the input of guest safety officers in our own strategies that we do for towns and cities.
Thanks very much. And as I say, it's been fantastic. Hearing you switch, over the piece to guest safety officers. It is so important, as far as I'm concerned, for a whole range of things, not only for the personal safety of guest safety officers, but the economic benefits that it could bring, a profit, as we will call it, to businesses by adopting a different model. Again, I've got a list there of stuff I still want to ask you, but we're going to have to call it a day. So I'm going to say, from me, Alistair Turnham, I am so pleased that you took the time to speak to us, and we look forward to having you again. Thanks, Ali.
No problem. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.
Yeah, Alistair, I've learned a lot today, so it's been brilliant to have you on, and I look forward to seeing you again as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Gary. I'll be in touch.
Definitely.
Right. Peace out, people.